Hi, Mick McQuaid here. I'd like to talk to you about color. And I know what you're thinking now. How can he tell this guy is talking to us about color? He's in black and white. Mildred, fix this set. There's something wrong here. The guy's talking color, but he's not in color. But that's the least of our problems. If I were in color, the colors that I'm talking about would be different from the colors that you perceive. So let me give you an example. This is a Nikon cleaning cloth. It's branded Nikon, and it's bright yellow. And you would see, if I were coming to you in color, you would see this bright yellow cloth. And my camera would interpret this yellow and record it as a file with a slightly different yellow than the yellow in the yellow of the cloth itself. The yellow of the cloth as I perceive it in person. Then I transfer this clip from my camera to the computer, and the video editor in the computer interprets the yellow once again. So that's two layers of interpretation. Then I upload the video to YouTube, which compresses it and interprets the color once again. You download it to your computer, another layer of interpretation. Your monitor is yet another layer of interpretation, and your eyes are yet another layer of interpretation. So we're not seeing the exact same color. So what we would like to be able to do when we talk about colors is to be precise, and that's difficult to do. Years ago, a man named Josef Albers, the Dean of Color Education in art education, came up with a system for talking about and comparing colors, and that's really the main thing that I'd like to talk to you about today. Albers was a very influential artist and art educator. As a matter of fact, as an artist, he had a commission from RIT, and there are two gigantic paintings of his in the lobbies. There are two lobbies in the Eastman building. In the lobbies of the Eastman building have two large contributions from Albers. It would be great if you could go and see them, obviously, when the building is open. I'm recording this during the coronavirus thing, so the building is locked down right now, and the campus is deserted. So anyway, Albers is, in addition to being an artist, as I said, was an art educator. He was born in the 1880s, and he worked as a young person at the Bauhaus, and he rubbed shoulders with Vasily Kandinsky and Paul Klee. He co-taught with Paul Klee and Walter Gropius and other luminaries of the Bauhaus. And then and the Bauhaus, in addition to the people who actually worked and studied there, had a lot of guests. So a lot of influential scientists, like the Gestalt psychologists, for example, came and gave talks there. So Max Wertheimer would have imparted the Gestalt, familiar Gestalt psychological paradigms to Albers while there. Then, of course, with the rise of Hitler, the Bauhaus was no more, and the artists fled to different countries, different, non-Hitler countries, I guess you could say. And Albers fled to the United States, where he spent the rest of his life. And Philip Johnson, the famous architect, arranged for him to get a job teaching at a place called Black Mountain College in the 1930s. And he taught there until 1950. And Black Mountain College was another hotbed of famous artists. There he met John Cage and Merce Cunningham, and he taught Robert Rauschenberg, and he met Charles Olson. So all different artists from all different fields came to Black Mountain College, which unfortunately dissolved under in a financial crisis in the 1950s. And Albers left Black Mountain in 1950 and went to Yale, where he was the head of design. and taught there for about 8 years before he retired, and then became a fellow at Yale. And during that time, he put together a project that he had been working on, his art education project, or his color education in particular project, called Interaction of Color. And this was published in 1963. He lived until the late 1970s, I think. And the original Interaction of Color was a combination of a book and a kit with colored pieces of paper. So the way that he did color education was he cut out colored strips of paper from glossy magazines and anywhere he could find them, and compared them with his students, compared colored strips of paper, and he would ask his students questions like, are these the same color? Are these different colors? Which of these blues is the bluest blue? And all kinds of questions like that formed the color education for a generation of influential artists. I was lucky enough to see one of these kits in an art show in the 1980s. It was on sale for over $200, which was a lot more than $200 is today, and I did not buy it. I've satisfied myself with first the paperback edition of it. I've had a couple copies of that over the years. And now the iPad app that came out, I think in around 2013, it was around the 50th anniversary of the original publication of Interaction of Color that the iPad app came out. And the and people complain about it being an iPad app. Why isn't it an Android app? Why can't we have Android? Android's cheaper than iPad. And yes, indeed, Android is cheaper than iPad, and it doesn't resolve color with as much fidelity as iPad. iPad is actually better than probably your computer monitor by a good bit. In fact, it's got the best color reproduction of any comparably priced device on the market. You can get really expensive broadcast monitors that are of higher quality, but they're really expensive. The iPad seems cheap in comparison, although it's more than the original kit. And the original kit, by the way, has been reproduced. I think it's a reproduction. The way that they describe it is the original book plus 150 color plates. Now, when I saw the kit in the 80s, it had many detached strips of paper that you could put on other strips of paper and compare the colors that way. And it doesn't sound like the new thing has that, but maybe it does. I'm not really sure. It's also possible that the kit that I saw was defective, that the colored strips had fallen off, and were supposed to be glued onto the colored plates. I have no way of knowing. But in any event, there are several ways that you can get a hold of of some version of Interaction of Color, and I suggest that you do, even though it only covers hue and value mainly. It doesn't cover every characteristic of color. And I leave it to you. You can easily Google terms like hue, saturation, and value, and get introductory definitions of all those terms. And I don't think that that's the most important part of your color education, getting definitions of those terms, and it's not something that I'm going to bother giving you myself. There are lots of websites that offer these. Some of them are contradictory in what they offer, in the terms, the definitions of terms that they offer. For example, there's one of the many color systems that is available is the Pantone matching system. And I noticed that I was just looking it up the other day, and I noticed that Wikipedia says that it has about 1,000 spot colors in the system. And if you go to Pantone's website, on one page it says they have almost 2,000 spot colors, and on another page they say they have a little over 2,000 spot colors. So it's hard to keep things up to date, and it's hard for everyone to agree on every little detail. But what I think you can agree with me on is that it's important to sharpen your eye. That's really important, sharpening your eye. Now, Albert's favorite saying was, and it's the beginning of of Interaction of Color, it's the beginning of the book, is the phrase, "Color is the most relative medium in art." And by that, Albers meant that, well, I think what he meant, I mean, he spent a lifetime educating people about what he meant by that. What he meant was that one color looks different in the presence of another color. One color is influenced by another color. In fact, he also, at the beginning of Interaction of Color, makes the comment that if you couldn't tell the difference between two notes, you might not want to become a musician. But if you can't tell the difference between two colors, you're just like everybody else. There are all kinds of ways that color can deceive you. And so sharpening your eye to see what color is really communicating to you is very important. And there are some exercises I'd like to share with you as examples from the iPad app. So what I've done is taken screenshots of the iPad app, and I'm going to overlay them on this video, and it will be better than nothing, but not as good as looking at the iPad app itself. You can see a striking example of this if you go to YouTube and search on the phrase Interaction of Color. And I highly recommend the first two videos that came up when I did it. The first one is something like Joseph Albers and Op Art or something like that by a YouTube channel called Imperfect Paintings. It's really interesting, and it has some photographs of the Bauhaus and photographs of Albers and different memorabilia and stuff. And the video maker goes through some examples of exercises that he does himself using pigments. He doesn't use the colored paper. Well, he does use the colored paper briefly in the video, but throughout most of the video he uses pigments, which Albers did not like to use. Albers, and you can replicate what Albers did without buying these kits, without buying the iPad app, which I highly recommend. But you can just get some glossy magazines and cut out strips of paper from them and replicate exactly the exercises that Albers did. So anyway, speaking of those exercises, I want to share, I guess, 4 of them with you. And the first one is an exercise about after images. So I'd like you to stare intently and just gaze very deeply at the black dot in the center of the red circle that I'm projecting on the screen. And I'd like you to look at that black dot unwaveringly for at least 15 or 20 seconds. And you might want to pause the video to make it easier to do that, although I think sometimes YouTube puts a logo when you pause the video. So I'll leave a little space here. And just stare at this black dot in the center of this red circle. And then I'm going to put on a white circle with a black dot, and I want you to stare at that black dot, and I want you to see if you see the color cyan, a vivid image of the color cyan superimposed over the white circle. And that's what most people see, in addition to vibrating crescent moon shapes at the edges of the circle. So that's an example of after images and how a color leaves an impression on you that is very specific. So cyan is the complement of the shade of red that I'm trying to convey to you. And it is normal for people to see the complement of the color as an after image when they gaze for a long time at a particular color. So the second exercise that I'd like to show you is has 2 little brown squares. And I'd like you to drink in both of these brown squares at the same time and see if they seem different colors to you. And then after a time we remove the intervening strips of paper, or in this case just the change the image so that the strips of paper are gone, and you see that they are the same color, they're the same shade of brown, but that they've been influenced by the backgrounds to appear to be two different colors. So you can make a color function in two different ways by using two different backgrounds. The third exercise is this image of two X's on a background, on two different backgrounds, and it should appear to you when you gaze at these two X's that the top one appears brownish and the bottom one appears yellowish. But if you look closely, you'll see on the right side that they are in fact one color. They're one line that goes, one single line of color that goes through the whole page, but they are influenced by the backgrounds, and they represent a midpoint between the two backgrounds. I should mention, by the way, that the iPad app is designed like a book. It is only meant to be viewed in portrait orientation, and so I'm sorry I'm wasting a lot of the frame here by showing you these images in the center. But that's the way that the book is meant to be seen. Now, the fourth exercise is, I think, in some ways the most interesting and the most difficult of them. So I'd like you to gaze at the two small squares in the center and see if you see that they appear to be the same color. They are in fact not the same color. They're actually quite different colors, and they're reproduced on the left side against each other so that you can see just how different they really are from each other. But if you open your gaze up to the two in the center, they will appear to be similar or even identical. And this is to most people. So one point that Albers makes in the book is that not all of his students agree. You can, another example is, which I'm not going to show you, is which of these blues is the bluest blue. And he says that I think 60% of the students agree that one particular strip of color is the bluest blue. And the votes are divided among the other strips of color. So don't be alarmed if you're one of the minority that don't see things the way that that Albers portrayed them. I think it is important to sharpen your eyes and improve your ability to discriminate colors and to be very precise in your intentions in colors. I remember once I was just shocked. I was doing a presentation and the printer didn't come out with the same colors that would appear on screen. And one of my collaborators, who was not very artistically engaged, said, "Well, who cares? It's not the color that I intended, but it's an okay color. It just doesn't matter to me." And I think it should matter to you as a designer. The colors that you intend should be important to you. In fact, I'll tell you another interesting point about the Pantone matching system, which is that the Pantone company sponsors a secret contest every year to name a color of the year. And the color of the year is portrayed on the Pantone website. You can see the colors for every year that they've done the contest on the Pantone website. As a matter of fact, I think you can see it on some other websites as well. And there's some verbiage about the colors, extensive description of the feelings that the colors evoked in the judges. And I think that that's something that's characteristic of a lot of designers, is that color excites them and color interests them, and to be really precise about color is something that I think is of value to designers. So I'd like you to explore interaction of color further. There are several videos, as I've mentioned, that where you can explore it. One of the videos shows a woman giving a speech about Albers, and she plugs her iPad with the interaction of color app into the projector, projects it on the screen, and then the whole affair is being video recorded and uploaded to YouTube and then downloaded to your computer. So when she mentions the names of the colors on the screen, it's almost hilarious sometimes when she refers to something that seems to be brown as purple, or other colors, pink, and colors that don't really seem to appear on, at least on my computer monitor, but colors that undoubtedly appeared on her iPad app. So it's difficult. Dealing with color is a difficult thing, but I think it's worthwhile for you to explore. And in addition to some of the more mundane aspects of color, such as the definitions of terms, like the terms that I mentioned before, as well as tone and shade and other color words, it's worthwhile for you simply to try to sharpen your senses in the manner that Josef Albers taught his students. So that's really the message that I want to leave you with today. Thanks for watching.